are. And here we are live. It is the last day of 2020. Thank the heavens. Not that tomorrow it's going to be much different, but it feels better. I called this show Feeding the Dragon after my good friend Chris Fenton's book. Chris, it's good to have you. It is this, well, I guess is it New Year in China yet?
It is. It's New Year. It would be, what is it? Let's see, +4. So it's 5 a.m. there. So yeah, they're well into 2021. Apparently there's already a new pandemic that's spreading. Just kidding. No, but we are at the 1-year anniversary. I actually tweeted out a New York Times article, I think came out January 5th of last year, about this mysterious pneumonia that was plaguing the Wuhan city region of China. Boy, that's not an anniversary we want to celebrate this year, I don't think.
Oh man, it was crazy because I remember this time last year we were covering it on Energy Week and we're like, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal early on, and then they kind of shut down Wuhan. You're like, okay, it's the Chinese overreaction, and obviously that all turned out to not be how any of it played out. So anyways, so Chris, first off, wish you and your family a happy New Year. Hope you guys have a fantastic night tonight. Everyone out there, be safe. And
yeah, likewise. Same to you, by the way. You're 2 hours closer. So what do you got planned on tonight? And by the way, I don't have, knock on wood, COVID. My kids just left the window open in our screening room last night, and I'm cold as hell. So, but anyway, what do you got going on tonight? You're at 3 o'clock already, getting close.
Yeah, so we had plans to go to someone's house, but it's been raining all day. It's supposed to freeze, so the roads might freeze over. So we're just going to stay here and go do something tomorrow. So pretty low key. But we're going to go do some fireworks and stuff. But that got put on hold until tomorrow. You guys are y'all allowed to get out in California? Because in Texas we can do what we want to. I don't know about California.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know if I'd go to fireworks anyway, because that's sort of supporting the Chinese CCP in a weird way. So I would actually argue that maybe we've canceled that just simply out of patriotism versus COVID, right? Let's see, what am I doing? Well, we have a family that we're friends with that actually have twins the same age as mine. So, and we've been sort of cohorting with them. So we're going to get together with them tonight and cook up some fillets and chicken and eat well, drink well, and then, crash diet, I guess, starting Monday again. But this has been quite a year, I got to say. And I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday. A lot of people have these, big hopes for just a complete change of 1 year to the next. I think we're going to sort of slog through sort of the beginning of this year. I'm hoping that we do have a fantastic 2021 year. I'm going to keep a lot of optimism out there, but just because we switch from 1 month to the next, I don't know if everything is going to flip on a dime. Maybe it does. Who knows? I mean, COVID flipped everything on a dime for us too. So,
well, 2021 is the year of the ox. And so if plodding through might be exactly what we're looking for. This show is live, and so if you are watching it as we are recording it here, 3 p.m. Central Time, and you want to leave a question or comment, we do take those as quickly as we can get to them. Okay, so we'll do the customary thing that you do at the end of the year. We'll talk predictions, look ahead, things you might expect to see moving forward. So obviously, I think let's just start with COVID. That's kind of the biggest thing, obviously. By the end of 2021, where do you think and hope the COVID conversation will be in regards to China and just globally speaking?
Well, look, I mean, I think if anything, COVID exposed a lot of the issues we have with the entanglement of China just in general. We talked about supply chains and national security issues. We've also talked about the World Health Organization and sort of our ability for the CDC to work in conjunction with Chinese authorities in order to figure out exactly how to deal with a pandemic, what we're dealing with, what are the quickest ways to vaccine. I mean, I think we've seen something that's a little difficult to comprehend now, which is, this idea of an alien invasion of Earth. You would like to believe that all the countries come together and work together in order to defeat the alien, but instead we all sort of went our separate ways. We got Russia with one vaccine, China with one, even the European countries in a way are sort of doing their own thing. We're doing our own thing. I'm hoping there's some collaboration, but it's definitely exposed the fact that we are a fractured Earth for sure. If I'm hoping for 2021, I'm hoping that a lot of the predictions, or hopefully the projections of how the vaccine gets out there, how effective the vaccine is, and how quickly we can get back to normal occurs before what Fauci has been saying lately in the last couple of days about this, like hopefully early fall. I'd like to believe maybe hopefully early summer, but I have no idea. I'm not a doctor. What do you think?
Well, I think Fauci's going to be wrong because he's been wrong all the way along. But I'll be wrong too. So I'll be wrong along with Dr. Fauci. I'll say this. I think the thing's going to be interesting is, let's say that by late summer, generally speaking, we feel like we can get out and move again. If you go back to early spring this year, there was questions about the origins of the virus. And I'm not one who believes that the virus was created in a lab. But I also think it's fair to ask the questions about how did it get there. There's fair questions to ask, right? China was very resistant to that. That's why we're seeing this Australia-China trade problems. Is that Australia wasn't saying what Trump was saying. They're just like, we're just curious what's going on here. That question hasn't been really pushed forward because of all the global problems that we've had. Each nation has been frustrated with how their government's handled it. So if you get to a spot to where that temperature kind of rolls down a little bit, I think then you might see some forward pressure on China to ask questions about the origin of the virus and to get back into that conversation. And I think that's when China might find itself in a problem, because if everyone's going, well, we didn't answer that last year because everyone's pissed off, but now that we're calmed down, we do want to know what happened here. Now, if China's smart, they would have a year and a half to really kind of get their story straight. I don't know if they will or not, but I think that's where we'll find ourselves at the end of 2021, going to 2022, those questions coming back, because the economic devastation, people are going to be wanting to blame someone. And if you're a government leader, who you want to blame? The other guy. And in this case, right, wrong, whatever you think about China, that's who they're going to want to point the finger to, is my prediction.
Yeah, although I would counter that prediction with just the power of what we talked about yesterday, which is the Ministry of Propaganda and the messaging that goes out, not just to their own populace, but throughout the world. China is going to be in a little bit of a defense, in the defense formation in regards to the last couple minutes of the game. They do not want a touchdown scored on them, i.e. Enough of the world to essentially create this message that it's all their fault, and that trickles into their 1.4 billion people and creates discontent for their leadership. They're going to fight like tooth and nail to make it look like they handled it right. All the numbers are going to essentially support that thesis. What we saw earlier this week with that 500,000 infected in Wuhan number, which was way beyond any of the numbers they projected before, is really interesting. I think we might be on the verge of hearing maybe a little more about how many did actually pass away from the disease there. Who knows what that number is going to be, but I guarantee those numbers are a lot higher than the official projected numbers. So it's going to be interesting to see how they message both internally to their people and externally as we start to put the heat to their, put the fire to their toes and make them try to come clean with what happened.
Agreed. Okay. Obviously, in the U.S., the big thing is we have a new administration coming in January 20th, Joe Biden. The narrative, if you go back just from the propaganda from China, was, oh, they didn't want Joe Biden because he could rally a coalition and he could get folks. And then we see that the EU is signing a deal with China, like literally spitting in the face of all of that narrative. What are your thoughts initially on how Biden will handle China? And the backdrop here is that there was the narrative that he can rally the allies. We'll see about that. But also, if he's too soft on China, there's a lot of hawkish people in D.C. right and left. And the final thing is we have his Hunter Biden's son. Whatever you think about it, there's his son made a lot of money over there, maybe legally, illegally, I have no idea. So being too soft on China would be probably get him some criticism. What do you think Biden's temperature towards China will be? Yeah, it's so interesting, and there's so many, I don't know, hypocrisies or conundrums in regards to, and like I say, I'm always trying to be nonpartisan in this, and some people actually know my party affiliation, which I'm not all that excited about in regards to either of them, but
the fact is, if you look at the Democratic Party, there's no party that should be more adamantly opposed to a lot of the problems that we have with China, from human rights issues to the offshoring of our middle class to all kinds of supply chains issues to especially the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, censorship, all that stuff that is so near and dear to the Democratic Party. It's interesting to see the dynamic move in the direction almost of what the GOP is supposed to be, which is pro-globalist, pro-free trade, pro-open net market, stick head in the sand if there's things you don't quite, agree with in the name of capitalism. It's daunting to me, right? So what is Biden going to do? I think there's going to be a little bit of a tell in who he names as his Chinese ambassador. And I'm curious who you think that name might be, or whether you're hearing any names.
Yeah. So is Iger officially out? Has he said one way or another?
Well, I mean, I did an appearance on Maria Bartiromo last week where I did happen to say that I thought he could be really qualified, but then I had quite a few caveats to why he might not be right for it too. And a lot of them had to do with some of the leadership that he had overseeing Disney all these years and how much kowtowing, whether it's a 57% ownership of the Shanghai theme park, or whether it's allowing them to take 75 cents of every dollar of their movies, or allowing protectionist policies, different censorship issues, different other repercussions of various other sort of IP trade theft, et cetera, to allow under his watch, and whether he was going to continue to allow that to occur under somebody else's watch for all industries and all people that are doing business with China, or whether he would start to see the light and clamp down on that as an ambassador in regards to carrying out policies and sort of the way that we think as Americans on that soil as he's ambassador. I doubt he will be the guy. I think if anything, that's going to showcase the fact that Biden is going to be soft on China. I think it's got to be somebody a little harder on China that has that symbolic feel that he's tough but also fair, or she is tough but also fair. And I don't know who that name is going to be. I mean, I've heard, for instance, John Thornton from the Thornton Institute as a name that's been brought up. Obviously, he's got Goldman Sachs history way in the back, but that might be far enough removed from it feeling like, oh, he's just going to Wall Street and picking somebody from Wall Street. So I don't know who it's going to be. Maybe it's somebody from the Pentagon. Maybe it's somebody that we haven't even heard of. I'm curious. Like,
I don't have a name. I think it's going to be someone who's considered a policy expert. Track 1, track 2. Policy type stuff, someone who's going to go in there, because if you're Biden, what you want to project is that Trump came in here and he was transactional and he was very much business, and that failed. We want to go back to the way things were, this establishment kind of mindset. So we're going to be very much about track 1, track 2 type diplomacy, someone who gets in there, understands the nuances. I think that's the spiel. So Iger, I don't think would work out well, because that's more of a Trumpian type hire, a business guy coming in to solve the problems. I think it's going to be kind of an old school, maybe a name that we haven't heard, but a name that's popular in DC, around those areas, someone who really gets China. That was the criticism of Trump administration. They didn't get China. And I think you're going to see a lot of kind of trying to go back to the normal tones that we saw previous administrations from the U.S. have with various folks, and Iger will get some job like the ambassador to Fiji or somewhere like that.
I would almost love to see something out of the box, like our mutual friend Bill Bishop from Sinosism.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. I think even Robert Daly, maybe from the Wilson Institute. Get somebody that really knows the country, has been there, lived there, understands the ins and outs, the nuances, has executed various business over there and various other activities. I mean, think out of the box, think outside of really that Beltway narrative, and who is that, and who can be both tough yet fair, who's thinking about stuff other than a Cold War or war, and thinking of something other than just rampant globalism and keeps things the same way.
Right. But I do agree with you, unless there's some speech or something that happens that requires Biden to address the issue, his ambassador pick will tell us a lot about his initial policy towards China and how that will be rolled out. Because the ambassador's job is just there to parrot what the president's stance is. And so if you pick, like when Trump brought in Bolton, everyone thought, oh my gosh, maybe Trump's going to get tough on, wars and, cracking down on stuff. And obviously that's because Bolton represents that. So we'll know more then. But I think that Biden finds himself in an interesting spot because both sides are very hawkish on China right now. And if he soft pedals it too much, he will get criticism. And I think Iger would be a terrible hire from the stance of the PR. People would just crucify him over that. So I don't think he'll go there. And Winnie the Pooh would get.
Yeah, I think you're right. So let me ask you a question. So we've saw various parts of the tough, almost mobster side of Xi Jinping in regards to people that have crossed paths from the wrong way, whether you go back to Bo Xilai and that scandal to Chairman Wang Jinlin of Dailan Wanda. Now, we see probably the biggest, I would say front man of capitalism or capitalism with Chinese characteristics in a lot of trouble, who's Jack Ma. What do you think is going to happen to Jack Ma in 2021?
I would be, if I was him, I would pay every dollar I had to get out of the country right now. I mean, right? Because you got to think about his options here. His options are, if he can work out a deal with the CCP, then he will essentially be shut up and be quiet for the rest of his life, as long as Xi Jinping's in power. Okay, so that's option one. Option two is, let's say he does strike a deal with Xi Jinping, and depending on what you think about how much longer he's going to be around, 2022, I think is the next time they're up for re-examine that stuff. But let's just say that there is a change in 2022. Well, then you have a new regime come in that might be worse than that. And so I think this is a moment where if you're one of the oligarchs, the elite in China, and you are not seriously considered exiting the country, it's going to be hard for me to feel bad for you in 2021, 2022, 2023, because the writing is now on the wall that the winds are changing, and you made a bunch of money, and good for you. But if you don't get out of there now, we might see some bad stories out of China. And the final thing I say is not only is it from the top, as we talked about yesterday, there's a lot of sentiment on the ground that is getting mad at these kind of rich elites. And so the Xi Jinping can look at that and say, okay, Jack Ma here, he is a bad guy, and they're getting support from the ground, which makes it you in a really bad spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then my follow-up question will be, what do you think the SEC does in regards to Alibaba trading on our exchanges here?
That's a tough one, right? I don't I don't know what to predict with the SEC. Gosh.
What would you like them to do?
Well, I guess we're gonna have to see what China ultimately does with Alibaba, and how much control do they take over and stuff. I would just say, as I said yesterday, if the CCP has a stake in the company, then we either A, you have to rid the country, us Americans, of insider trading laws, or B, they shouldn't be allowed to be listed. Because that's just the way the law is. Because Xi Jinping can come out and manipulate policy and manipulate the stock price as a result and make billions and billions of dollars on stock. That's insider trading. And so I am actually for legalization of insider trading personally, but it's not legal. So if it's not legal, then it needs to be fair. And so if the CCP is going to take control, at least a decent amount of control, then I think that they should be listed here. That would be my stance.
Yeah, I would actually argue, given what just happened with Ant and what seems to be unraveling with Jack Ma, you could actually have a lot of CCP officials short the stock and then literally shut down Alibaba. I don't know if it's in our best interest to allow American or global investors access to trade that stock here in the United States of America, knowing that the government of China essentially can dictate anything that happens with it right now.
Yeah.
That to me is a scary situation. It is not capitalism by any stretch. And I don't care how much Wall Street lobbyists whine and cry that they need to make those crumbs off of every trade. I would just say that's happening on the backs of massive risk for mom and pop shareholders and retail investors alike.
Yeah, it makes more sense to make it easier for Americans to go risk their money on the exchanges in China. And so if we want to go risk our money there, than to bring it to the U.S., where you'd have a populace who doesn't really understand all the intricacies of what might be happening on our stock exchanges. Because you kind of presume a company listed in the U.S. has certain protections. If you go to China, you understand fundamentally that this is different there. And that's China, South Africa, wherever. You understand that there's just different rules, different laws. The companies here, I do agree that you kind of presume that there's protections in place that probably aren't there.
So let me ask you this: Texas, that's a big box office state, great entertainment down there. You guys devour it in various ways. Obviously, we make movies out here in Hollywood. I'm curious what you think is going to happen with AMC, which is the largest theater chain in the country, and is also 40% owned by the Chinese Dailan Wanda. What do you think happens to that company, given their debt load, given sort of what the theater going experience seems to be right now, what it will be, what your family tends to do about movies now, or the way you're thinking forward, or even neighbors of yours in Texas? What do you think happens to that company?
Okay, so I heard this the other day, so you can help me answer this question. This will time to answer. My understanding is that the movie companies are restructuring their deals with the theaters, which will make the ticket that you pay the theater more money for the theater now moving forward. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly? So that because they're going to streaming, that they're going to give more percentage to the theater can keep more percentage of the ticket sales, right?
Possibly. I mean, there's a lot of disruption going on there. There's some studios, for instance, like Sony, they're not going to a hybrid model. They're going to go theatrical, and they're going to use that leverage as more exclusive content to get better deals with the exhibitors.
Okay. So I would say this. So I have a wife and 4 kids. My oldest is 13. My youngest is 1. So, we don't just go to the theater unless it's a big movie event. So we'll still go for that just because it's hard to logistically to get a 13, a 10, a 5, and a 1-year-old to theaters. The other thing is that the dang theater is so expensive. I think it has a feel to it that's nice to go and to enjoy. But on the flip side, it's nice just to turn on the streaming service and just watch the movie right then. You pause it, you get up. I think if you're on a date, if it's a big movie, big blockbuster like Iron Man 3, I think those movies will still have draws. I'm not sure about the B and C movies if people will want to go see those because, I mean, let's be honest here. The theater experience is hit or miss. Sometimes you go and you got people in there talking, throwing popcorn or whatever. So I think theaters are in trouble. That's my stake. And they've been shut down most this year, so they got a ton of debt as well.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd like to see with AMC is what should have never happened to begin with, having our largest exhibitor owned by the Chinese, and then the Chinese actually did a spin-off IPO, which allowed them to downsize their investment to 40%. But having anything of that scope in distribution owned by a foreign entity is not a good idea. It was all done before the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States started to clamp down on this type of acquisition. But I would, in a perfect world, like to see China come out, Dailan Wanda essentially recapitalize AMC, allow it to restructure under that new capital and those new resources, and then have the government, our government, come in under CFIUS rules and regulations and really downsize that Chinese investment to something that's way more tolerable than 40%, having that type of influence that's probably in the 10 or 15% range, or maybe we just tell them to get lost and sell the rest of it and keep it in American hands. Maybe that's overly patriotic versus capitalistic, but we should have never gotten in this situation in the first place. It's just dangerous. We wouldn't want 35% of our television broadcast stations owned by the Chinese. So why do we want 35% of our theater chains owned by the Chinese?
I'm curious, just in general, how do you think the theaters will be able to rebound? I mean, they've been closed for what, 6, 7, 8 months now, and so, how long can these theaters just stay closed without just going under?
I think Chapter 11 is a beautiful part of capitalism. I think you should allow some of these companies to go bankrupt and restructure and bring down their debt loads and redo their leases and shut down, facilities that just aren't working well, because disruption's upon us. So you just keep throwing money at it, and bailout funds is just going to make more zombie companies, which we've already have too many of already. So I'd like to see bankruptcy come in, change the landscape, make it healthier in the long run. Movie going habits are obviously going to change. They already have in this country. They were happening before COVID, and then they just got accelerated and amplified from COVID. So we're not going back to the way it was. So to just keep these things alive, to keep them alive, is a ridiculous use of taxpayer money. I do think the theater going experience will have a reason to survive past COVID. I think that communal experience of seeing a really scary horror movie or a really funny comedy or a huge blowout Marvel movie or whatever it is always going to be something that's fun, whether you're an adult, a young kid, a teenager, whatever it is. It's just not going to be an every Friday night thing like it was when I was growing up.
Agreed. So we talked about this a minute ago. Well, no. Let's talk about this. So you mentioned AMC. Let's talk about another U.S. company, Apple. What do you think about Apple? I know there's a lot of pressure on them. Trump was touting that trying to bring some of the Apple jobs back to Texas. Over the past few months, that's kind of been lost in the news cycle. That what's going on with Apple. Obviously, Google was getting a lot of pressure at one point. These big tech companies, 2021. Do you think they'll be able to double down, stay in China, stay do what they're doing? Will they have to move their supply chains? What's your prediction for that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a perfect time and place to lead by example if you're a company that has the wherewithal to do that. I mean, you look at Apple's cash surplus or cash on reserves, it's crazy. Their stock price is through the roof. Investors love them. They really can do no wrong. I'd love to see a company like that make almost a Muhammad Ali stance and say, hey, you know what? We're going to create a new trend. We're going to move away from these supply chains that are using, forced labor or underpaid labor or slave labor or whatever it is. We're not going to abide by everything we need to do to kowtow to the CCP to get our products and services in there. If it does hurt what we're doing, you know what? We'll make up for it somewhere else because, quite frankly, we're going to create this new brand identity on top of one that's already awesome, which is saying, hey, we also do the right thing. And I'd like to see other companies follow suit. I mean, look at Disney has figured out, hey, you know what? We thought theme parks and ESPN and everything else were so important to our stock price, and they don't even have, half of their stuff in operation right now, and their stock is through the roof because they found another way to make money, right? The streaming or what else investors love. I think the same thing could be seen as China. Like, hey, you know what? We thought China was the big coup de grace that we had to have in every quarterly report in order to make investors and shareholders excited and have our multiple really high. Maybe there's a new thing that's more innovative where we can say, hey, look, we don't need China's growth to make our company great. We're going to do this or we're going to do that. And that allows the leverage of the CCP over all our industries and companies to mitigate over time, and thusly we'll be able to get back to a much more healthy relationship with them where we're not, following their every command and every whim.
So you mentioned ESPN there, and we talked about this offline a little bit. The NBA, they're back going now, but they're not back in China like they were. Someone like the NBA, what are they to do? Or what might they do this year? Because they don't really have a spot where. I mean, how do they diversify their balance? It's not like they can go to. I mean, they can try to go to Europe, they can try to go to Africa, they can try to go to South America, but China is really the only other market that's suitable for what they're doing. So, what might they do? How do they get back in the CCP's good graces without giving up everything that we've asked them not to do? As far as messaging and stuff.
Well, look, I'm not a sports analyst expert, but if I'm looking at it from a macro based on just entertainment expertise and how things are valued, I might say, hey, look, they should really focus inward a little bit on the domestic market, which is paying massive amount of money, I think, through 2025. That's allowing these huge salaries for for a lot of their marquee players. With the change in viewing habits and all the different forms of content out there, I still believe live sports is always going to have a massive sort of gem inside a coal mine type of value to it. And if they focus on creating that value to the highest level possible, I'd like to believe they can offset any sort of the downside of what's going on in China right now. I mean, we were talking earlier, if you are talking to any of your friends in China, you find out, hey, they are streaming their games, but CCTV Channel 5, their sports network, is not airing the games yet. They've been off the air for over a year. No one's talking about that, of course, because it's not allowed to be talked about on ESPN because of the NBA. Right. But it seems like that's a story that should be told, because I think that might be partially because Daryl Morey is back in the league working for the 76ers. And by the way, shout out to Daryl Morey for being a true American and speaking up and holding firm on your rights to free speech. I'm glad he is working, but China's not, and I think we're going to still see a lot of those repercussions. I do know that the value of the league is not where it was at its peak. I think a lot of people were turned off by what happened. I think there was a lot of messaging coming out of the Ministry of Propaganda about what happened there that caused various parts of that society to turn slightly against or just get less interested in the NBA. So they have to rebuild, but they're going to need to figure out how to rebuild and do it as Americans and do it in a way that isn't too vocally kowtowing, because people are watching their every move.
Yeah, and the thing that if we're not careful, will sneak up on us is they'll have collective bargaining, and the players will be whining about, hey, we're not getting as much our cuts lower, we're not getting as much money. Well, okay, this China stuff, if you're not careful, you will find yourself with these multimillionaires, poor fellows, will have to take a cut, and the messaging around that will be interesting, because will people point back to this fact, say, well, okay, we kind of lost China as an audience, and we kind of Daryl, we didn't handle that right, and so we never could get back in the good graces. And I think that, to your point about it not being on TV and ESPN not talking about it, that's frustrating. It's not that I need ESPN every day doing an update. Is the NBA on Channel 5? I don't need that, but it should be a story. That's something that people are talking about. And for as much heat as the NBA took for not standing up for Daryl Morey, they should get some credit for bringing him back in. And I know it's the 76ers, but let's be honest here. Adam Silver was on that phone call, right? He was on the phone call. They were asking his permission, can we hire this guy? Because it's more than just one team. So they should get some kudos. And the fact that we're ignoring it is kind of frustrating, but that seems how it goes with China. You ignore it and hope it goes away.
Yeah, that's a funny comment, because you're right on the mark. I think about like Clay Travis from Outkick the Coverage, and he was one of the first to give a shout out when Daryl Morey came back onto the 76ers, and he was the biggest critic against the NBA during that whole time. So in a way, it shows hey, look, we can criticize, but we also, the whole idea of being critical is about formulating a better plan moving forward and influencing the right decision making and the right moves and activities by Americans. And when it actually occurs, give a shout out and compliment that by giving that reward, and you would think that ESPN might do the same thing. I haven't seen it. I might have missed it on some of the shows, but it should have been as big of a story of him coming back as it was when, this whole thing went down last October.
Yeah, it feels like, I'm not saying this is what it is, but it just feels as if the NBA is trying to hide it so that it's not dunking on, to use a pun there, it's not dunking on the CCP from their perspective. So they want to keep it under wraps, and that's the thing. It's like, guys, you talk about all this stuff all the time, okay, and Americans would rally behind that. That's what I keep saying. Americans would rally behind the fact that you guys are standing up to the CCP. We brought him in because Americans would rally behind that. But when you let those narratives kind of go to the wayside, Americans are like, all they remember is what happened last season and all the messaging there, and they don't realize that you're doing other things. And so I don't understand. I don't understand it.
I agree. And not only that, I look at, and I had a conversation with somebody in the sports industry about LeBron James, and I'm saying, here's a guy who's worth $1 billion. He's really well respected around the world. How about if he took a stand and said, what's happening in China is wrong. I don't want to deal with that country anymore until they rectify some of these things. I guarantee there would be retaliation against him in some sort of short form from China, or perhaps it was it would be permanent from China. But I'd also argue that sort of Muhammad Ali, like taking a hard stand on something that no one else is willing to do, would be rewarded. He would be rewarded by doing that with every other country and every other market that cares about what his brand stands for and loves him as a player. Like, he might actually go from being worth $1 billion to $2 billion simply by doing the right thing. Whether that's his priority or not. I mean, obviously, he's very big into, civil rights and all that kind of stuff here domestically. But I would argue it could be another great platform and another great message for him to carry out that has all the good intentions and all the great effects, yet also could be monetized.
It's yes, no. So it's as simple as this. LeBron James comes out tomorrow and says, my shoes are made by Nike. Nike makes whatever percentage of my shoe or the whole shoe or whatever in China. Until China stops doing X, Y, and Z, I will no longer allow my name to be put on a shoe made there. And here's what I'm going to do, because it costs money. I'm going to take 30% less, 20% less, whatever it is, 40% less, so that back in Akron, Ohio, where I'm from, we can have a plant to make the shoe there. So I'm going to take a less cut. He would sell so many shoes because, like you're saying, he would sit so he could take a 30% reduction in salary, onboard a bunch of people from Akron or wherever, and he would sell shoes like gangbusters because people would be like, yeah, he's got our back. And that, to me, those are so simple plays. I don't understand. It's like, God, man, because you would, like, to your point, he would sell $1 billion worth of merchandise more than what he's selling now, because people would think he's actually he's standing up for something that is hurting him. And when you do that, people will give you more money. It's really weird how it works.
Well, and by the way, the other thing is too, it doesn't risk any of the damage to his legacy in the areas he's made his legacy. Like, is he a GOAT? Is he, the greatest player other than Michael Jordan, whatever it is? How many rings has he won? All that stuff. By taking that stance, not like, oh, we're going to rip all that achievement on the court away from you. No, right. You don't. So he keeps all of that. Mm-hmm. Is that going to affect his civil rights and domestic policy and all the stuff he stands for there? No, not at all. In fact, it actually complements it. So it's just another legacy that he adds to what happens when he leaves the game. Like, and that legacy is completely the opposite of sort of the hypocrisy legacy that many people will believe he's always associated with from now until, people stop talking about him. Right. So It almost has that double effect where it takes away the last negative he has and makes it into a massive legacy positive. And like I said, all that money he'd leave on the table from China, I guarantee would be made up elsewhere.
Yeah, because he would have to take a reduction of percentage so the shoe be at the same price. And so people would see that. And you remember the story, you might remember this. Kylie Jenner, I think, or one of the Jenners or Kardashians was going to be like a billionaire, and she couldn't because of something. She wasn't there. And so people started donating money to her so she could be a billionaire. I don't know. I don't follow all that. But there was a story like 4 or 5 years ago where people were like donating money to get her to be the youngest billionaire ever. You just stop and think about that. People are giving someone money to be the youngest billionaire. If they'll do that, just imagine what they would do if you said, I'm going to sacrifice 30% of my $80 million a year contract or whatever it is, and we're going to put jobs back in America. It's a done deal. It's just a done deal. And so I don't understand. The risk there is so minimal to me, it seems.
By the way, I see it on a really tiny little version of that, where I've had people reach out to me saying, hey, I never really thought too much about China, Hollywood, and all that stuff, but it seems like you put yourself out there to lose a lot of business by writing that book. Just so you know, I bought your book the other day simply because I love the fact that you're being a whistleblower on something that I think is terrible. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. I don't know how many more books I'd have to sell to make up for some of that stuff, but it is true. Like, people are good, like deep inside, like, and there's some terrible people, obviously, but most people are pretty good. And when they see somebody else doing good, they like to reward that behavior. It's animal instincts in ways. So anyway, I think we should be advising LeBron tomorrow.
We'll get this deal knocked out. Okay. Any final hopes, desires, dreams, predictions for U.S.-China relations as we go into 2021?
Look, my biggest thing is I just want people talking about China, and I want it not just on the right wing platforms, but also on the left, which has been very difficult to get going. And I don't know why it is, but it's a crazy sort of conundrum that's ongoing. China is a red and blue and purple and green and everything else issue for all Americans and all our Western allies. Like I said, I don't want a war or a Cold War, and I don't want what's ongoing right now either. There's some smart mixture between oil and gas and water and spices and everything else that will make the concoction work. Yeah. But we're never going to figure out what that is if people aren't willing to talk about it and talk about it openly and talk about it transparently. And like we said yesterday, C-suites being able to, disclose when they're doing certain things to get their product and service in China, and allowing their investors and shareholders and the public and the critics and the journalists to weigh in as to whether that's something that really they should be rewarded for through capitalistic means, or should they be punished for doing things like that because it's going to take money out of their pockets in other markets because people don't agree with it. We can't make China and our engagement with China a third rail issue anymore. It's got to be talked about by everyone. There's got to be great ideas. There's got to be bad ideas. There's got to be mediocre ideas. And we got to just formulate how we're going to take the long game approach with them, because they're thinking about it every single day. Every single day, they're thinking about, how do we rise to the top? How do we do that? If we can't do it tomorrow, how do we do it in 25 years? How do we do it in 50? How do we do it in 100 years? They're not thinking every 3 months. They're not thinking every 2-year election cycle. They're not thinking about bandaging some budget, compromise through the weekend. They're thinking long game. And we need to do the same. And until we're talking about it, we're just not going to get there. And this country is way too great for that to happen.
Okay. Well, that is, I will say simply, yes, we need to talk about it more, which is why it's the first real issue on this show. So we talk about it as much as we can. And so, okay, Chris, well, listeners, wherever you may be, hope you have a wonderful new year. We'll be back, I guess, next week sometime. Chris, hope you and your family are safe tonight. And, it's not too cold. It's getting cold here in Texas. It's in the 30s. It's like, man.
Yeah,
it's cold. So,
well, have fun tonight with the 4 little ones and your wife and whoever else is joining in your little cohort. And here's to a fantastic 2021 for everyone. And really enjoying the last 4 episodes of doing this with you, and looking forward to a lot more.
All right, folks, pop a bottle.